Chapter 201, Section 1. Natsume Yuya agreed with Kikyo. Asking her to give up her power right now was out of the question. Besides, such a strong combat ability couldn't simply be discarded. All they could do was find a way for her to completely control that demonic power. Thinking that through, Natsume opened a teleportation portal and stepped back into his familiar room. The place that had been spotless was now covered in dust and grit from the previous battle. On the mountain it didn't matter, but back home the mess was hard to ignore. He sighed, shrugged it off, grabbed fresh clothes, and headed for the bathroom. That night, back on the mountain where things were still chaotic, Natsume reappeared. "At this stage, I still lack some offensive techniques," he muttered. He found a solid stone to sit on, looked up at the rising moon, and began to think. He could copy other people's moves, but the current chat group didn't offer many worlds to draw from. The strongest members, Dinessa and Kikyo, used a greatsword and archery with spiritual arts respectively, effective, but not quite his style. The fist techniques he had learned packed power, but they couldn't fully exploit his Kai. He realized his ways of shaping Ki were still too limited. Ki can take forms like water, lightning, fire, he thought. If I can fuse the force of fist techniques into those forms, maybe it'll work. Ideas came fast under the moonlight, striking like lightning in his mind. That same night, Kagaya Ubuyashiki and the others at the foot of the mountain heard thunder on the mountain, flashes of lightning, flames leaping up, and the roar of water like a rushing torrent, a vanished disease. The next day, Dinessa and the three sisters, Butterfly Kanai, Shinobu, and Tsuyuri Kanao, accompanied by Claire, set out for the mountain with their supplies. The tremendous commotion from the night before had left them worried. If Dinessa hadn't sensed other presences, she'd have assumed Natsume had been in a fight. He trained all night. What did he come up with? Shinobu wondered, looking toward the peak. Vague, chaotic air currents swirled around the summit. The view toward it looked warped, as if seen through heat haze. Tsuyuri Kanao tilted her head, a flicker of curiosity in her vacant pupils. Dinessa's silver eyes narrowed. Alongside the thunder, a terrifying, almost bestial aura had erupted the previous night. Before, changing a breathing technique took him half a day. This time he spent the entire night, she murmured. Who knows what he's come up with? Butterfly Kanai, remembering how Natsume had modified a breathing technique in a short time before, shared their awe and curiosity. That earlier modification had been different from ordinary breathing, and it had more growth potential. Whatever he was developing now had to be significant. As they climbed, the damage became obvious. Where there had been crisscrossing sword marks the night before, now the land showed even more devastation. Blackened patches, faint white smoke rising as if from intense heat, pits filled with muddy, murky water. It was as if multiple disasters had struck the same spot. I knew he caused a ruckus, but I didn't expect it to be this bad, Butterfly Kanai muttered. When they reached the summit, they found a single figure seated cross-legged on a large tree stump, facing the sun as it rose. Brilliant but not blinding light washed over him like a veil. They couldn't see his features clearly, only the flutter of his clothes and strands of hair were visible. Are my eyes playing tricks on me? Why can't I see him properly? Shinobu rubbed at her eyes. No, it's the same for me, Kanai replied. Tsuyuri and Claire nodded in agreement. Dinessa frowned. Unlike the others, she had been watching more carefully. A strange current of air seemed to surround Natsume, warping their vision. Is this what he was working on last night? She asked. She thought back to his words. If he could maintain that air current in battle, it could redirect weaker attacks sideways, dispersing them. The current also distorted the perceived location of Natsume, making it hard for opponents to judge where to strike. If an enemy missed that point, their attacks would go wide and leave openings for him to counter. Judging by the scene outside, it probably isn't just one move, Dinessa said quietly. Seeing the damage along the way, she realized why he had spent so much time. Developing new techniques could take a long time. Her own ability to sense demonic energy had taken time to grow from talent into proficiency. Whatever Natsume had been shaping in the night, it demanded serious effort. Chapter 202, Section 202. Going from nothing to something took even longer than anyone could count. Without inspiration, not even one night, maybe not 1 year or two, would be enough. You couldn't develop the necessary techniques overnight. You're here. At the sound of the girls' voices, Natsume Yuu turned his head. The strange current of air around him dissipated like a clear breeze. His already handsome face emerged, and the faint golden veil of light clinging to him gave him an almost divine air. Shinobu stared for a moment, a faint blush coloring her cheeks. The others were likewise taken aback. Kanai, known to them all as Butterfly Kanai, the one most familiar with Natsume Yuu, recovered first. With a gentle smile, she stepped forward. "Didn't you rest at all last night?" Her teasing reproach came accompanied by the fluttering of her haori in the dispersing wind, like a dancing butterfly. "Don't forget you're not in the best shape." "I did rest for a while, otherwise it would have taken longer," Natsume Yuu said, shaking his head. He had had a fierce fight with Dinessa last night. His internal energy had been almost completely drained. Even after returning, having dinner, bathing, and resting, full recovery in so short a time was impossible. He had spent energy testing techniques, then sat to think, either to refine new methods or to recall his battle with Dinessa and draw lessons from it. That was only part of the reason. The main reason was something surprising that had been happening to him, and that had kept him busy all night. "Good," Kanai smiled, satisfied, and put down the basket she'd been carrying. "Come, have some water, and eat something." She opened the basket to reveal a gourd and some sushi. She had worried he might be hungry after staying here an entire night and expending so much energy. "Let's all eat together. It would be awkward otherwise." Natsume Yuu glanced at Dinessa and the others and smiled faintly. Eating alone while these people watched felt strange. "All right, let's eat together." Kanai started to say they had already eaten, but when Natsume Yuu agreed, she only nodded and called, "Everyone, come and eat." She greeted Dinessa and the others as they gathered. Natsume Yuu picked up a piece of sushi and ate it. The others followed suit. "By the way, one type of affliction in my body disappeared last night." He swallowed the food calmly and spoke. Measured against the hundreds of millions of different curses and ailments that lived inside him, the disappearance of just one type would be imperceptible to an ordinary person, like taking a feather away from a mountain. But to someone who had endured them all his life, even one vanishing felt like a rope around his chest loosening a little, giving him a rare sliver of space to breathe. "Oh!" Kanai's soft response swelled into a louder exclamation as the meaning sank in. Her two younger sisters and Claire looked at her in astonishment. They didn't know the context. Dinessa's gaze shifted to Natsume Yuu. When they had first transmigrated, they'd watched the live broadcast and learned the horror he'd carried, a lethal poison that would kill a normal person in one hit, multiplied by hundreds of millions. Even Dinessa, half human and half demon, was sure she would have died under such a burden. "Did you take some kind of medicine last night?" Kanai, a physician by training, immediately thought of that possibility. She began to run through what he'd eaten. "Or was it something you ate? Anything new? Or maybe it's because of the environment you were in." Questions tumbled out of her, one after another, her body leaning closer until her delicate face was almost touching him. At first, she had only been acting as his doctor, unable to bear seeing a young man suffer. But over time, after accepting his kindness, something else had grown: affection. Kane's feelings were changing, and her excitement showed. For a moment, Natsume Yuu wondered who actually had the problem. Seeing how much she cared, however, made him quietly happy, and the corners of his mouth curved up. "All right, calm down," he said, reaching out and touching her shoulder when he noticed the looks from Shinobu and the others. Kanai didn't calm immediately. She only began to when Natsume Yuu pointed out her sister's astonished faces. Then she realized how forward she'd been. Holding a fist lightly to her mouth, she coughed. "Cough, cough. Do you have any guesses?" "I probably have one, but it still needs verification," Natsume Yuu replied, picking up another piece of sushi. He spoke with calmness as if the discovery had nothing to do with him. Seeing him so composed only raised Dinessa's estimation of him. If an ordinary person had found a way to cure a terminal condition, they'd likely be ecstatic, hardly sitting quietly to cultivate. For him to remain calm and continue training impressed her. "So that's why you stayed all night," Kanai said, the realization dawning on her. It takes time to sort through the reasons, Natsume Yuu agreed. He rubbed his forehead. A disappearance like this wouldn't happen without cause. Even when previous increases in strength had allowed his body to resist, there had always been traces to follow. In his spare moments, he replayed events piece by piece to draw conclusions. Whether his deductions were right, he would have to test later. Seeing him tired, Kanai's expression softened. Quietly, she stepped behind him. Chapter 203, Section 203. A moment later, Natsume Yuu felt a faint medicinal scent surround him. The air pressed in from both sides like low hills, soft and enveloping, as if it might swallow him whole. Slender fingers replaced his own on his temples and began to massage gently. The embrace was complete. The tiredness that had been clinging to him slipped away. "You worked hard." A delicate voice came from above. Even without looking, he could picture that gentle, refined face. Shinobu stared at her older sister in surprise. She still didn't understand what was happening, but from the earlier conversation, she sensed it wasn't simple. Shocked by Kanai's actions, she nevertheless kept quiet, unwilling to disturb them. Tsuyuri Kanao and Claire watched with wide eyes, unreserved. Wrapped in that softness, Natsume Yuu didn't struggle. He simply let himself enjoy the older sister's care. "All right, we'll go over the details in the group," he said after a moment. "If it's what I think, I'll need everyone's help," Kanai replied. Claire and the others were watching too intently for him to linger, so he hurried to clarify. Hearing that, Shinobu's face fell. She had been on the verge of finding out what was going on, and now the answer might be withheld. Various feelings swelled up in her, but it was his business. She couldn't force him. She fell silent and glanced around with a barely contained expression. "If you want to know, just ask Kanai later," Natsume Yuu said with a smile. He didn't want to keep repeating himself. It would be better to explain everything clearly when everyone was together. Shinobu brightened for an instant, then scolded herself and pulled back. "Cough. I'm not that interested, really, but if you let me listen, I suppose I can't refuse." She put on a half-act of indifference, not at all like the battle-hardened insect Hashira she could be. Right now, she looked like a young girl, vulnerable and eager. Natsume Yuu didn't tease her. "Thank you," he said to Butterfly Kanai as he stepped out of her embrace. "I'll head back for now. We can talk after everyone wakes up." Chapter 122, Speculation about the Body. It was barely 7 in the morning. Even the girls who had school probably hadn't risen yet. Whatever needed to be discussed required everyone's presence. Kanai nodded kindly. "Take care." After exchanging farewells with Claire, Tsuyuri Kanao, and the others, Natsume Yuu summoned the portal and stepped through. He had been active all night, and at first felt nothing, but once he'd calmed down, the need for a bath nagged at him. "I forgot to ask him what technique he developed," Dinessa said suddenly, remembering the question she'd left on the mountain. The way he had cultivated currents of air around the body had already opened her eyes. The rest of his techniques, she guessed, couldn't be too bad. The others' expressions shifted as they all realized how they'd let the main purpose slip from their minds in the chaos of the night. "All right, then we should go too. Thank you for your hospitality," Dinessa said, turning to Butterfly Kanai with a smile. "Thank you," Claire added with a bow. Yesterday had been the most wonderful day of her life so far. The food, the bed, the warmth wings she'd never known. She felt genuine gratitude toward the women before her. "You're welcome to come again," Kanai replied, hands folded gently. She crouched and handed the remaining food from the basket to Claire. Seeing how happy Claire had been with a hot meal and a proper bed, she had guessed the girl had suffered before. "Thank you," Claire said, taking it. Her face lit up with excitement. "If we get the chance, we'll see you again," Dinessa said, ruffling Claire's hair before she waved goodbye. Shinobu waved as well. Tsuyuri Kanao remained silent, but mirrored the gesture. When the white vortex vanished with the others, only the 3 butterfly sisters were left on the mountaintop. Shinobu sighed enviously. "That was so nice." "What's wrong?" Kane asked, looking at her younger sister. "I want to go see other worlds and see how they differ from ours," Shinobu admitted openly now that there were no outsiders around. Their clothes, their speech, everything felt so different from what she was used to. Tsuyuri Kanao, nearby, showed a subtle, unusual change in her expression. For someone who was normally so composed, Even a small shift was noticeable. Shinobu seized on it, smiling. See? Kanao's interested too. Kanao's eyes widened. Her body stiffened and a bead of sweat appeared at her temple. The tension was almost tangible. Kanai's posture softened. The close-fitting fabric of her clothing traced a gentle curve as she leaned in. Her pale purple eyes met Kanao's, and she said in a low, comforting voice, "It's okay. Say whatever you're thinking. I'll listen quietly until you finish." After a moment's hesitation, Kanao reached into her pocket and produced a copper coin. Shinobu and Kanai were silent as Kanao flipped the coin into the air. They watched it spin until it reached its peak and fell back into her hand. It came up tails. Though her face remained calm, the mood around her sank. "We really want to go." Shinobu and her sister Kanae exchanged a look. The same meaning passed between them. Then toss it again." Kane, the butterfly, tapped her lip lightly with an index finger and smiled brightly. Hearing her, the girl with dim eyes looked up in surprise. "See, nobody said you could only toss it once. So toss it until you get the result you want." Kane smiled playfully and lifted a finger. Because of Kanao's childhood trauma, she couldn't hear her own inner thoughts. Teaching her to toss the coin had been the way to give her the will to express them. Kanae didn't want to make decisions for her. She only wanted Kanao to begin perceiving her own thoughts. Once Kanao could do that, the coin would no longer be necessary. There was no hurry. Now that Kibutsuji Muzan was gone, they had the time. "That's so casual," Shinobu, standing nearby, pouted in disbelief. "I taught Kanao this method. Deciding how to use it should be my call." Kanai only drew playful circles in the air with her index finger. The easy, light atmosphere lifted Kanao's spirits. The usual small smile returned to her face. Seeing her sister nod, Kanao tossed the coin again. 3 pairs of eyes watched intently. It landed tails. Shinobu's face fell. Kanao glanced at Kane, who smiled and nodded again, and tossed the coin once more. Luck did not favor her. Several failures in a row left Kanao with a faintly downcast aura. "Ara," Kanai's voice was amused but encouraging. Again, Kanao steeled herself and tossed the coin once more. The spinning coin landed in her palm. The 3 of them held their breath. "We succeeded," Shinobu burst out, cheering. After so many failures in Kanao's low mood, Shinobu had been unable to shake her own gloom. The sudden success lifted her spirits even more. "Kanao is amazing," Kanai said, hugging both her sisters. When the coin fell heads up, the low cloud around Kanao dissipated and her smile brightened. "You really didn't have to do this," Shinobu protested, though she didn't push Kanai away. Kanai kept her arms around the 2 of them and asked gently, "Kanao, do you have anything you want to say?" "I want to see too." Kanao's voice was small as a whisper. "All right, I'll take you." Kanai nodded. "Later, if there's something you want to say, toss until you get the result you want, okay?" "Okay." Natsume Yuu didn't know anything about the 3 sisters' matter. After getting home, he washed up, made breakfast, and ate with Natsume Reiko. They chatted until it was past 8, and then he went back to his room and opened the chat group. "Last night, when I was at Kane's place, one of the afflictions in my body suddenly disappeared." "Disappeared? Did you take some kind of divine medicine?" As someone who knew what was wrong with you, Doma Umaru, still on her way to school, couldn't contain her shock. The thing plaguing you was a curse or illness that could be fatal and couldn't be cured by modern medicine. The only thing she could think of was something supernatural. When one disappears, maybe more will follow. That would be good. If we can figure out how it happened, could it help the others? Different illnesses might need different cures. The same thing might not work for all of them. If it happened at Kanai's, could there be something in that world we can use here to dispel it? The curse just disappeared? I was in that world last night and found nothing unusual. How can something that even I can't handle vanish without reason? Is there something different about you now? Apart from Danessa and a few others, Yu's message provoked a flurry of reactions. "You did say he had a guess and he needs our help. Just tell us what to do. I'll help however I can." Having been saved before, Miko was the first to volunteer. If it weren't for the fragment of the Nichiren blade you had given her, she would have been overwhelmed by those terrifying spirits. Constantly seeing them had frayed her nerves. "If you need me, I'm in," Psycho offered boldly, her mature smile unapologetic. Seeing you fight had stirred something in her. She admired his hunger for battle. She didn't hide it. "That's a little shameless, but if you need me, I'll help too." One after another, the others voiced their support. "Thanks, everyone. Now for my guess. I don't know if it's right, we'll have to verify it." The group quieted expectantly. Was there anything different about yesterday compared to before? Two things come to mind: the fight with Danessa and the long time I spent at Kanai's place. Fighting at full strength actually felt good, but I trained that way when I was younger, and it didn't make the curse disappear, so that's unlikely. The more likely possibility is the time I spent in other worlds. There's one thing I don't think I've said before. The words made everyone in the chat prick up. I'm a transmigrator. What's a transmigrator? As someone from the Middle Ages, she truly didn't know the term. A transmigrator is someone who travels from one world to another. Section 205, Butterfly. Isn't that the same as us? No, most transmigrators can't go back. Chitanda continued, and besides, after death, it's only the soul that travels between worlds. She had recognized that the members of the chat group were characters from light novels and anime, so she had started reading up on them recently. That gave her some familiarity with the terms they used. Exactly. When I died back then, I was reborn into this world. It wasn't until I reached my teens that memories from my previous life came back. Along with them, the illness began to manifest. So you think those curses are connected to your traveling between worlds? Yes, the illness or the curse seems to be attached to the soul. Maybe it's a kind of rejection reaction caused by moving between different worlds, or something like that. He had suspected as much before. At the time, however, there was no way to test or confirm it. The ability to travel between worlds had only surfaced recently, and even when he remembered the theory later, there was nothing he could do about it. After the chat group formed, the idea slipped from his mind. And when he first traveled to meet Chitanda Eru, the affliction hadn't faded, so he didn't dwell on it. Last night, though, when the illness suddenly subsided, that old theory came back to him.